The OCA standards cover operations and programming and are broken down into the following sections: COVID-19, management and administration, human resources, campsite facilities and equipment, healthcare, food service, all trips and excursions, transportation, programming, land programs, boating, swimming, and outdoor education centers. As you're reading through the standards and evaluating your compliance, it's important to remember that to receive or maintain OCA accreditation, camps and outdoor education centers must meet 100% of the applicable mandatory bold standards and 90% of all applicable recommended standards in each section.
So, if you're in the Management and Administration section and you answer no to 2 applicable recommended standards, that's okay. If you answer no to 3 or more applicable recommended standards in Management and Administration, that will score as an equivalent to a mandatory standard being answered as no.
We are going to go through a number of common issues the Standards Accreditation Committee sees when reviewing answer sheets. Some of these have been addressed in the Sunday Standard, OCA's newest publication that's been coming into your inbox every Sunday starting April 3rd and going to June 12th. Past issues can be read in the members portal. It's disclaimer time. Our interpretation of the OCA standards are provided by the Standards Accreditation Committee, the Standards Review Committee, and the Ontario Camps Association Board of Directors. In addition to this video, we recommend that you read the contextual education for each standard and contact the OCA office if you have any questions. Now, with a little help from our friend Christina, we're going to explain some of the common issues we've seen when evaluating answer sheets.
Swimming in a swimming pool. If you're taking your participants swimming off-site where swimming supervision is provided by an external aquatic staff, here's a helpful tip. When looking at the swim standards, such as are staff trained in water search and evacuation procedures for each swimming area, and are the water search procedures practiced as necessary, it's your responsibility to sit down with the pool manager and confirm that all applicable swimming standards are being adhered to. Once confirmation has occurred, the standard may be answered yes.
When days are hot, when days are cold, there's a section in swimming titled Off-Site Swimming. This section is meant to be answered when supervision is provided by an external aquatic staff. If the only off-site swimming is done on wilderness travel programs or at a waterfront or pool where your staff are supervising, this section does not apply. This section would apply, for example, if your camp was going swimming at a local municipal pool.
If your camp is using third-party off-site facilities for programming, have you done your due diligence to ensure they follow industry best practices and relevant government regulations? This standard was introduced as a workaround for camps that take their participants off-site for a non-swimming program that's listed in the standards, like challenge courses and riding programs. If your camp is using third-party off-site facilities in which your staff are not leading the program, you are only required to answer this standard. Don't answer the activity standards in the long program section.
Just in time for snack, my favorite time of day. If your camp or outdoor education center does not serve meals to campers but provides snacks, only one standard in the food service section applies. However, the type of snack further determines the standard's applicability. If your camp provides snacks only or purchased food from a third-party caterer that prepares off-site, are they purchased, stored, and served in a safe manner? In the standards, snacks are defined as pre-prepared and pre-packaged. Pre-prepared snacks are snacks like cheese and crackers, veggies and dip, cake bought at the grocery store. If your camp or outdoor education serves these types of snacks, then this standard does apply and needs to be answered yes or no. Pre-packaged snacks are purchased sealed. Snacks like granola bars, chips, and cheese strings. If you serve pre-packaged sealed snacks only, none of the food standards apply, and you can answer not applicable to the whole section.
Not many people know this, but I've got a hidden talent. I love baking. And guess where I baked the most? You got it, camp. I used to love running Baking with Rose programs for our campers. Do the food service standards apply to cooking as a camp activity? The answer is yes.
Camp food is the best. For camps and outdoor education centers that provide meals, there are two ways to answer the food service standards. Most overnight facilities hire a caterer that prepares food on site, so all the food service standards apply. Day camps are more likely to purchase food from a third-party caterer that prepares the food off-site, and they only need to answer FD 1.2. Also, if you don't provide meals but the occasional pizza day, FD 1.2 would also apply.
There is nothing like sitting down to a meal cooked over a campfire after a hard day's work. For our camps that operate exclusively with wilderness travel programs, they only need to answer trip food, not any standards in the food service section. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to get back to tending the fire.
Outdoor education centers, sit back and relax here, as this part doesn't apply to you. Everyone else, listen closely. Who are your healthcare staff? Don't think you have healthcare staff? Think again. All day and overnight camps have healthcare staff, even those without doctors or nurses on site. You need to have a minimum of one first aider, and that person is your healthcare staff. So if you don't have doctors or nurses, any standard that speaks to healthcare staff applies to your first aiders, your designated healthcare staff. For example, is an orientation provided for new and returning healthcare staff? And is this healthcare staff involved in any ongoing evaluation and development of procedures for the medical or healthcare program? These standards would be answered yes or no, not non-applicable.
That's right. All day and overnight camps have health center too. The contextual education defines a health center to also be an appropriate designated area which allows for the assessment and care of unwell or injured staff and campers, and should be easily accessible. A place to rest or isolate a sick camper or staff, for example, for overnight accommodation in an overnight camp, and a place that is easily accessible for a parent to pick up in a day camp. Knowing this definition, every day, overnight, and family camp have a health center, and this section does apply.
Anywhere the standards talk about staff, they are referring to both volunteer and paid staff. We work with camps that are staffed solely by volunteers, and legally, these volunteers are exempt from certain training. However, the OCA is requiring all staff and volunteers to complete the training outlined in our standards, no matter what. This includes occupational health and safety training. This is because volunteer staff assume the role and responsibilities of staff without pay. If volunteers assume this responsibility, they should meet the minimum age and requirements as recommended for the position and should be treated as staff members.
If you rent your site, it's still your responsibility to discuss and confirm with the site manager the applicable standards are being met. For example, does a camp have accurate site plans available on site showing the locations of utilities, sanitation lines, and other underground services? Many camps that rent or lease facilities often answer the standard as not applicable. However, this standard still applies. It's important that you or the on-site maintenance staff have easy access to the site plans during an emergency. If there's an electrical fire, for example, you need these site plans to help manage the fire.
If a camp rents from an OCA accredited facility, it is not exempt from discussing the campsite, facility, and equipment section with the accredited camp. Also, just because a site is accredited doesn't mean the camp renting that site is accredited.
Lions and tigers and bears, oh my! With the exception of our zoo and animal camps and related trips and excursions, the threats of lions and tigers are non-existent, but bears, on the other hand, are a threat to many of our camps and outdoor education centers. Some of you operate in an area where there is a very low threat of bears and ants are not applicable to the entire section of animal interactions. However, wildlife encompasses more than just bears. The contextual education lists a moose, poisonous snake, rabid animal, as well as a raccoon, coyote, or off-leash dog as wildlife in non-urban and urban areas. I don't know about you, but I've had more scary run-ins with a Canada goose than I ever have with a moose.
Rob, what's the craziest animal you've seen in the city?
I did see some coyotes roaming a school playground in the fall. That was pretty frightening.
Who thought dangerous wildlife existed in urban settings? For camps in the city to camps in the wilderness, you never know what your campers and staff may run into on and off site, even for a walk around the block. Just like in the animal interaction section, many urban day camps answer the standard, do the trip leaders know and follow planned safety procedures for any unwanted animal interactions, as not applicable, because they don't think of any wildlife existing in the downtown core of the city. The standard is applicable, however, as the contextual education explains, that there's potential dangerous wildlife in urban areas, including a raccoon, a coyote, or even an off-leash dog.
One last common issue. BT 1.1. Does your camp comply with Transport Canada's regulations for operator and vessel licensing and follow all safety requirements? This standard does apply to non-motorized watercraft like a canoe or kayak.
At a glance, it looks like there have been many changes to the standards in 2023.
With the goal of making the standards easier to interpret and navigate, the Standards Review Committee, in conjunction with the OCA membership feedback from town halls in the fall of 2022, as well as throughout the year via email, the standard visit feedback form, and online answer sheet submissions, the committee worked hard to amend the standards this year. Proposed amendments are shared with the OCA membership well in advance of voting, and members are always encouraged to ask questions and provide feedback to the proposed amendments. The proposed amendments for 2023 were approved at the annual general meeting on January 25th, 2023.
An overhaul was done to standards focusing on the following areas: family camps, Tier 3 wilderness travel program definitions, and trip swimming.
Here are some of the new standards that were approved for 2023 that are considered not trip swimming. Number 1, litmus test. Addition to standards review terms of reference. Number 2, the removal of reference to Red Cross assistant lifeguard. Number 3, family camp standards, which includes the following standards. MA 1.3. Does the application form provide the necessary written terms of the contract between registering party, aka parent, guardian, etc., and the camp? This is a recommended standard. HR 4.1. For all camps where minors or vulnerable persons attend without their guardians, does the camp have an overall camper to staff ratio of 8:1 or better? This is a mandatory standard. HC 2.4. Does the camp collect health information for all minors or vulnerable persons that do not attend with their guardians, including any special needs and accommodations required for participation in camp activity? This is a mandatory standard. SW 2.5. No action. This is also a mandatory standard.
The All Trips and Excursion standards apply to operators who take campers and participants off-site, whether for a walk to a local park or ice cream shop or deep into the wilderness for a multi-day excursion. Recognizing that OCA members vary significantly in their trips and excursions, for 2023, the Standards Review Committee put forward a major restructuring of this section to make it easier for camps and outdoor education centers, as they only answer standards that specifically apply to their programs. When determining whether this section applies to your programming, the first thing to do is read the general notes on pages 99 and 100, which contain very detailed definitions for day and overnight trips and excursions. If your camp and/or outdoor education center organizes trips and excursions, you will need to identify which type of trips or excursions you do, and you may want to fall into multiple categories: day trips and excursions, overnight trips, extended backcountry trips, and wilderness travel programs. After reading the definitions of each tier in the general notes and having determined which ones apply to your operation, only answer the subsections that apply to your program. You can choose NA for all other subsections. If your trip and excursions include moving water and/or swimming, the first two subsections, TR1 and TR2, should also be answered. Swimming on trips, TR1, applies when swimming is supervised by your camp or outdoor education staff and when the activity takes place in a non-designated area off-site. If your camp regularly swims at a local pool or waterfront and is totally supervised by a third party, then you should refer to SW8, off-site swimming. Let's look at the changes made to TR1 trip swimming. TR 1.3. Does the trip swimming supervisor hold a minimum current Bronze Cross certificate or equivalent certification approved by the Minister of Health? TR 1.4. Are all trip leaders, swimming supervisors, aware of all participants' swimming abilities, and is this ability verified by a swim test at the earliest practical instance? TR 1.5. Are all swimmers supervised by the swim supervisor, and do all weak or non-swimmers wear a PFD when in the water? TR 1.6. Are the adequate practices in place to limit access to the water for all participants? If not, do weak or non-swimmers wear life jackets when near the water? And TR 1.7. Before participants may swim, have trip leaders inspected any swimming area, created boundaries, and evaluated access, bottom, depth, current, debris, and other hazards. Please note that these standards are all mandatory. In addition, TR 1.12, do all participants wear footwear when in the water, and TR 1.13, if swimming without a life jacket, are participants supervised by the swimming supervisor and are participants confined to a marked and defined area. These two standards are only recommended.
You'll notice that it's mandatory in our standards to have a camp safety plan. There may be times in which the OCA is asking camps and outdoor education centers to comply with standards they're not legally required to adhere to. So, for the camp safety plan, WHMIS training, etc., answers of not applicable because you're not legally required will not be accepted. The Standards Review Committee could shout their love of Ontario Regulation 503-17 from the rooftops. They're always seeking new committee members, so reach out to the OCA office if you're interested. Additionally, they want you to know that they're forming a critical path with enhanced membership input. Remember, these are your standards.
With your devotion to maintaining high standards for organized camping, let's talk about how you can use the standards to prepare during the preseason. You can review your policies and procedures and combine them with the standards. Directors are encouraged to ask questions to their visitors. A great way to do this is to flag standards in your Step 1 submission of the answer sheets. to flag a standard, answer it as no with the explanation discuss with visitor. Visitors should look for any flags prior to the virtual review. You can use standards as a checklist for forms and written procedures. You can also use a standards tracker tool that was included in your visit information package. You can use standards to train and retrain staff. Directors should give applicable standards to the appropriate staff. Ask whether your staff know where certain manuals or protocols are. If your staff are in crisis, would they know where resources are and able to answer questions if you aren't there?
Finally, as an added resource, OCA Standards has a summary of standards at the back, which lists each standard by section. This is a great summary, and it's meant to be shared with your staff.